The rain hammered down on the cracked asphalt outside Rusty's Roadhouse, a weathered biker bar on the edge of a forgotten desert town. Neon signs flickered through the downpour, casting erratic red glows on the puddles that mirrored the stormy sky. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of stale beer, cigarette smoke, and the faint tang of motor oil that clung to every leather jacket. Laughter boomed from the corner booth where a group of rough-edged men swapped stories of long hauls and narrow escapes, their voices a gravelly chorus against the jukebox's low hum of classic rock. But in the shadowed alley behind the bar, something shattered the night's rhythm. A young woman, her face pale and streaked with mascara, stumbled out the back door, clutching a bundle wrapped in a thin blanket. Her hands trembled as she glanced over her shoulder, eyes wide with desperation. The bar's muffled noise faded behind her, replaced by the relentless patter of rain. She knelt beside a rusted dumpster, her breath coming in ragged gasps, and gently placed the bundle on the wet ground. A soft cry pierced the storm, a baby's wail, tiny and insistent. She whispered something inaudible, a plea or a prayer, before turning and vanishing into the darkness, her footsteps swallowed by the thunder. The infant's cries grew louder, cutting through the veil of rain like a siren. No one inside the bar heard at first. The door had swung shut behind her, sealing the secret away, but as the minutes ticked by, the sound carried on the wind, faint but unrelenting, until it reached the ears of Ethan Harlan, the stoic leader of the Iron Vipers Motorcycle Club. Ethan was nursing a whiskey at the bar, his broad shoulders hunched under a faded leather vest, scarred by years of road dust and close calls. At 45, he carried the weight of a life etched in losses, his wife gone to cancer a decade ago, his only son lost to the streets in a haze of bad choices. He'd buried those pains deep, binding them with a promise whispered over his wife's grave, to protect the vulnerable, no matter the cost, because the world had taken enough from him already. Ethan's head snapped up at the cry, his calloused hand pausing mid-sip. The bar's din seemed to fade as he listened, brow furrowing. "You hear that?" He muttered to no one in particular. Beside him, his second-in-command, a burly veteran named Marcus, tilted his head. "Sounds like a kid?" The two men exchanged a glance, the kind forged in brotherhood, and Ethan was on his feet in an instant, pushing through the door into the storm. Rain soaked him immediately, plastering his salt and pepper hair to his forehead, but he didn't flinch. His boots splashed through puddles as he rounded the corner, flashlight beam from his phone cutting through the gloom. There, huddled against the wall, was the bundle. A newborn, no more than a few weeks old, face scrunched in terror, tiny fists waving against the cold. The blanket was sodden, and the baby shivered with each sob. Ethan's heart clenched like a vice. Memories flooded back unbidden, the soft coos of his own son, the warmth of a family he'd failed to hold together. He dropped to one knee, shielding the child from the rain with his body, and scooped it up gently. "Easy now, little one," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that carried the gravel of too many miles. The baby quieted slightly at the touch, nestling against the heat of his chest. Marcus appeared behind him, wiping rain from his eyes. "What the hell? Who leaves a kid like this?" Word spread like wildfire through the bar. Within minutes, the Iron Vipers, 50 strong, a convoy of weathered souls bound by more than ink and engines, gathered in the lot. Their Harleys gleamed under the security lights, chrome accents dripping with rain, engines idling with a deep, throaty growl that vibrated the ground. Ethan cradled the baby inside, wrapped now in a clean towel from the bar's backroom, while the club's medic, a sharp-eyed woman named Lena with tattoos snaking up her arms, checked the infant over. "She's cold, but okay," Lena said, her voice steady. "No signs of harm, just scared and alone." The rain eased to a drizzle as dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and golds. Ethan stood at the bar's entrance, the baby secure in his arms, watching his crew. These weren't just riders. They were his chosen family, patched together from broken lives, veterans like Marcus, who'd lost a leg in some forgotten war, single mothers like Lena, who'd walked away from abusive homes, wanderers seeking purpose on the open road. He'd founded the Vipers years ago on a vow to stand for the overlooked, to ride against the tide of indifference. And now, this tiny life had crashed into their world, demanding they honor that oath. "We can't just hand her over to the system," Ethan said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. The club fell silent, eyes on him. "Not after what we've seen. Kids lost in red tape, families torn apart by folks who don't care. This one's ours now. We find who left her, we make sure she's safe, but we raise her right, give her what we never had." Nods rippled through the group, a pact sealed without words. Marcus clapped a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You lead, brother. We ride." As the first rays of sun broke through the clouds, the Vipers revved their engines, a thunderous symphony that echoed across the empty streets. The town, still asleep, stirred at the sound, curtains twitching, porch lights flickering on. Little did they know, this abandoned soul would bind them all, unearthing secrets and testing loyalties in ways that would shake the foundations of their quiet community. Ethan glanced down at the baby, her eyes fluttering open to meet his, and felt the weight of a new promise settle in his chest, one that would demand everything and change them forever. The convoy rolled out slowly, headlights piercing the morning mist, carrying not just a child, but the spark of redemption for men who'd long ridden in shadows. In the distance, the bar stood silent, its alley empty now, but the echoes of that cry lingered. A call to arms for the honorable hearts beneath the leather. The sun climbed higher over the dusty horizon, turning the morning mist into a shimmering veil that clung to the Iron Viper's convoy like a reluctant farewell. Ethan Harlan rode at the front, his Harley rumbling steady beneath him, the baby's warmth a fragile anchor against his chest. She'd been secured in a makeshift sling, fashioned from an old bandana and Lena's spare jacket, her tiny breaths syncing with the engine's pulse. The desert road stretched endless, flanked by saguaro cacti standing sentinel, their arms raised as if in silent witness to the rider's vow. Behind Ethan, the club fanned out in formation, 50 bikes in tight formation, a rolling testament to unity, forged in fire and forgotten battles. They'd chosen the old ranch house on the outskirts of town as their temporary haven, a weathered sprawl of timber and stone that Ethan had claimed years ago after a long-haul payout. It sat isolated amid scrub brush and wild mesquite, far from prying eyes, with a wraparound porch that creaked under the weight of memories. As the convoy pulled up the gravel drive, dust clouds billowed like smoke signals, announcing their arrival to the empty landscape. Engines cut off one by one, the sudden silence broken only by the distant call of a hawk wheeling overhead. Marcus dismounted first, his prosthetic leg thudding softly against the ground as he scanned the perimeter. "Clear!" he grunted, ever the watchful guardian from his days in uniform. Inside, the air carried the faint scent of aged wood and sun-baked earth, a far cry from the bar's haze. Lena took charge immediately, her hands steady as she laid the baby on a soft quilt spread across the scarred oak table. The infant's eyes, a stormy grey, blinked up at the unfamiliar faces circling her, tough exteriors hiding hearts scarred by their own abandonments. "She's got a fighter's grip," Lena observed, wrapping her in a fresh blanket warmed by the hearth. Ethan watched from the doorway, arms crossed, the lines around his eyes deepening with a mix of resolve and buried ache. This child wasn't his blood, but in that moment, she echoed the son he'd lost, the one who'd slipped away into the shadows of addiction, leaving only echoes of what could have been. Word of the night's discovery had already begun to ripple through the town, carried on the wings of gossip faster than any telegram. By midday, as the Vipers settled into their roles, some brewing coffee strong enough to strip paint, others rigging a cradle from spare parts in the shed, the first visitors arrived, not in welcome but in suspicion. Sheriff Harlan, no relation to Ethan, though the name had always been a thorn, pulled up in his dusty cruiser, lights flashing without siren, a toothpick clenched between his teeth. He was a man built like a barrel, with a badge polished brighter than his sense of mercy, representing the kind of authority that bent rules for the right price. Ethan met him on the porch, the screen door slamming shut behind him like a punctuation to their standoff. The baby stirred inside, a soft coo drawing Lena's attention away from the pot of simmering stew. "Heard you boys picked up a stray," the sheriff drawled, his eyes narrowing under the brim of his hat. Rain from the night before had left the ground slick, and his boots left muddy prints on the steps. "That kid ain't yours. Social services'll want her. Papers, Ethan. You know how this works." Ethan's jaw tightened, the promise he'd made to his crew, and now to this child, burning like hot iron in his gut. He'd seen the system chew up innocence before. Kids shuttled between foster homes colder than any desert night, families fractured by indifference. "She's safe here," he replied, voice low and even, like the rumble of thunder on the horizon. "No one's taking her until we know her story. Who left her, why? You got a lead on that." The sheriff spat into the dirt, a gesture laced with disdain. "Some runaway, probably. Town's buzzing, folks saying you Vipers are playing house now, but this ain't a nursery, it's a liability. One wrong move, and I'll have the whole department out here." Marcus stepped up beside Ethan, his presence a wall of quiet menace, while the others lingered in the windows, shadows with watchful eyes. The air thickened with unspoken tension, the kind that simmered before a storm, testing the bonds of loyalty against the grind of institutional doubt. As the sheriff drove off, tires kicking up gravel in frustrated arcs, Ethan turned back inside. The club gathered around the table, the baby's presence drawing them closer, like moths to a fragile flame. Lena had fashioned a bottle from scavenged supplies, and the infant nursed hungrily, her small hand curling around a finger offered by a grizzled rider named Tyler, whose own daughter had been taken years ago in a custody battle gone sour. "What's her name gonna be?" Tyler asked, his voice rough but tender, breaking the heavy quiet. Ethan paused, gazing at the child. Names carried weight, promises etched in syllables. "Hope," he said finally, the words settling like dust after a ride. "For all of us." Nods passed around the room, a silent oath renewed. But outside the town whispered, rumors of the young woman's identity surfacing like ghosts from the sand. She'd been seen before, working odd jobs at the diner, eyes haunted by secrets she couldn't outrun. Whispers of a family fractured by old debts. A father with ties to the wrong crowd, pressuring her into silence. That afternoon, as the sun dipped toward the jagged mountains, a lone figure watched from the ridge above the ranch. A woman with rain-damp hair, her face pale against the golden light. She clutched a locket, fingers tracing the engraved initials inside, torn between regret and fear. The Vipers had ignited something in the community, a spark of moral fire that threatened to expose the rot beneath the surface. Corrupt officials turning blind eyes to the vulnerable, families shattered by greed. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket, a tip from an old contact hinting at the mother's trail. The ride was just beginning, pulling them deeper into a web of redemption and reckoning, where loyalty would be the only shield against the gathering shadows. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the ranch, turning the air into a shimmering haze that distorted the horizon like a mirage. Ethan Harlan wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, the salt stinging the old scar above his eye. a souvenir from a bar fight in his wilder days, before the Vipers became more than just a club. He stood on the porch, phone pressed to his ear, listening to the gravelly voice of his contact on the other end. The line crackled with static, as if the desert itself conspired to muffle secrets. "She's holed up in a motel on the edge of Blackridge," the voice said, low and urgent. "Name's Sophia Reed. Young, scared. Word is her old man's got debts to some rough types. Left the kid to keep her safe, or so she thinks." Ethan's grip tightened on the railing, the wood rough under his calluses. Sophia Reed. The name stirred vague memories, flashes of a quiet girl at the local diner, serving coffee with downcast eyes, avoiding the leers of truckers and locals alike. He'd nodded to her once or twice, a silent acknowledgement between outcasts. Now, this. He ended the call and pocketed the phone, his mind racing like an engine pushed to the red line. Inside, the ranch hummed with quiet purpose. Lena hummed a lullaby to Hope, rocking her in the cradle Tyler had hammered together from barnwood and leather straps. The baby's soft gurgles filled the room, a counterpoint to the tension coiling in Ethan's chest. Marcus joined him on the porch, leaning against the post with arms crossed, his prosthetic leg planted firm. "Trouble?" he asked, eyes scanning the empty road, as if expecting shadows to rise from the dust. Ethan shook his head, but the weight was there, heavy as the chain around his neck, a locket with his wife's photo tucked beneath his shirt. "Her mother's out there running from something. We go find her, bring her back. This kid needs more than us patching her up." Marcus nodded, the bond between them unspoken but ironclad, forged in the fires of wars they'd both survived, one overseas and the other on these very roads. By dusk, a smaller group of Vipers saddled up. Ethan, Marcus, Lena, and a handful of trusted riders, including Tyler, whose gentle hands belied the tattoos of a man who'd once broken bones for a living. Their bikes growled to life, headlights slicing through the fading light like knives. The ranch receded in the rear view, a sanctuary they'd defend with their lives, but the road ahead promised reckonings. Blackridge was 20 miles east, a dusty speck of a town clinging to a faded highway, where motels sagged under neon signs promising rest that never came. The ride was meditative, the wind whipping at their faces, carrying the scent of creosote bushes and distant rain. Ethan led. Hope's image burned into his thoughts, a tiny fighter who'd already claimed a piece of his guarded heart. They pulled into the motel lot under cover of twilight, the engines cutting off with a final sigh. The Desert Rose Inn loomed, its paint peeling like old skin, vacancy sign buzzing faintly. Room 7 glowed with a sliver of light through threadbare curtains. Ethan approached first, boots crunching on gravel, while the others fanned out watchful sentinels. He knocked, 3 sharp raps that echoed down the empty breezeway. Silence. Then a shuffle inside. The door cracked open, chain still latched, revealing Sophia's wide eyes, red-rimmed and haunted. She was younger than he'd imagined, barely 20, her dark hair tangled, a bruise blooming faintly on her cheek, marks of a life pressed too hard. "Who are you?" she whispered, voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. Ethan held up his hands, palms open, the universal sign of no threat. "Name's Ethan. From the bar last night. We found her, your baby. She's safe, with us." Sophia's breath hitched, a sob escaping as she unlatched the chain and stepped back. The room was a tomb of despair, a sagging bed, a half-eaten sandwich on the nightstand, the air thick with the stale scent of fear and cheap perfume. She collapsed onto the edge of the mattress, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't want to. My father, he's in deep with some lenders. They threatened her, said if I kept her, they'd—" Her words trailed off, but the implication hung heavy, a shadow of coercion that twisted Ethan's gut. Lena slipped inside, her presence a calming force, kneeling beside the young woman. "You're not alone now," she said softly, her voice cutting through the gloom like a beam of light. Marcus and Tyler stood guard at the door, their silhouettes imposing yet protective. Ethan crouched to Sophia's level, his eyes meeting hers, steel grey against her tear-streaked hazel. "We don't abandon our own, the Vipers. We're family to the forgotten. Come back with us. We'll sort this, your father, the threats. But Hope needs her mother." The name hung in the air, a bridge between stranger and kin. Sophia's hand flew to her mouth, fresh tears spilling. "You named her." "Oh God, I didn't even." Outside, the night deepened, stars pricking the velvet sky like distant promises. But the reunion was short-lived. Headlights swept the lot, unannounced and aggressive. A black SUV idled at the edge, its tinted windows hiding eyes that watched too closely. Sophia froze, her face draining of color. "That's them. My father's men. They followed me." Ethan's blood ran cold. This wasn't just debt. It was a web of small-town corruption where sheriffs like Harlan turned blind eyes for a cut of the action. Marcus signaled the others, bikes revving in unison, a warning roar that vibrated through the walls. Sophia grabbed a worn duffel, stuffing in what little she had, her movements frantic yet resolute. "I can't run forever. If you're really offering—" Ethan nodded, helping her to her feet. "We ride together now." They burst out into the cool night air, Sophia climbing onto the back of Lena's bike, clinging tight as the convoy peeled away. The SUV gave chase, tires screeching, but the Vipers were ghosts on the road, twisting through back alleys, engines howling defiance. Bullets pinged off gravel in the distance. A desperate bid to intimidate, but no one fired back. Ethan's code was clear: justice through honor, not vengeance. Back at the ranch, as the group thundered up the drive under a canopy of stars, Hope stirred in her cradle, as if sensing the shift. Sophia rushed inside, scooping her daughter into trembling arms, the first real embrace since the storm. Tears flowed freely now, washing away layers of isolation. The club encircled them, a circle of leather and loyalty, sharing quiet stories of their own redemptions. Marcus speaking of the brother he'd saved from the brink, Tyler, of the daughter he'd fight to reclaim. Ethan watched from the shadows, the weight of his old promise evolving, binding this new family in threads of unbreakable trust. But dawn brought new shadows. Word had spread faster than the wind, town whispers turning to murmurs of outrage, then reluctant awe. The sheriff's cruiser patrolled closer, and tips hinted at Sophia's father rallying allies, men with badges and grudges. The Vipers had ignited a fire, one that exposed the underbelly of their world, debts enforced by fear, lives discarded like roadkill. Ethan stepped onto the porch as the first light gilded the horizon, coffee steaming in his mug. The road ahead was fraught, demanding sacrifices that would test every vow. Yet in Sophia's grateful eyes and Hope's peaceful sleep, he saw the flicker of redemption, a quiet victory against the cynicism that had nearly claimed them all. The town would cry, not from sorrow, but from the raw truth of hearts that refused to break. The first light of dawn filtered through the ranch's lace curtains, casting elongated shadows across the worn floorboards like fingers reaching for secrets long buried. Sophia Reed sat in the rocking chair by the window, Hope cradled in her arms. The baby's soft breaths, a rhythm that synced with the creak of wood and the distant lowing of cattle from neighboring fields. The night had been a blur of reunions and revelations. Sophia's tear-streaked face pressed against her daughter's cheek, the Vipers standing sentinel as if their very presence warded off the encroaching dark. But now, in the quiet hush before the world stirred, doubt crept in like fog rolling off the desert. Ethan Harlan leaned against the kitchen counter, nursing a mug of black coffee that steamed in the cool morning air. The scent of it mingled with the earthy aroma of fresh bread Lena had baked in the pre-dawn hours, a simple act of nurturing that grounded the chaos. His eyes, shadowed by fatigue, flicked to Sophia. She'd changed into a clean shirt from Lena's stash, but the faint mark on her cheek lingered, a silent accusation against the man who'd driven her to such desperation. Her father, Victor Reed, a once respected rancher, fallen into the grip of shadowy lenders who preyed on the town's fringes. "You sleep any?" Ethan asked, his voice a low gravel, careful not to shatter the fragile peace. Sophia shook her head, her fingers tracing Hope's downy hair. "Not really. Every noise. I keep thinking they'll come." The words hung heavy, laced with the terror of a life spent evading threats. Victor had borrowed against the family land years ago, promises turning to chains when the debt soured. He'd pressured her to marry into money to fix things. But when she chose motherhood instead, the warnings escalated, whispers of harm to the child she carried. Leaving Hope at the bar had been her desperate bid for safety, a mother's gamble in a world that offered no mercy. Now, with the viper's shield around her, gratitude warred with fear in her eyes. "You all risked so much last night. Why?" Ethan set his mug down, the porcelain clinking softly against the granite. He crossed the room, pulling up a stool to sit level with her. The air between them carried the weight of shared scars, his from losses that had hollowed him out, hers from a family twisted by greed. "Because we've all been there," he said, his tone steady as the horizon. "Abandoned, chased, left to scrape by. The vipers aren't just riders. We're the ones who pick up what's been dropped. Honor demands it." Marcus entered then, his boots thudding lightly, carrying a tray of scrambled eggs and toast. He nodded to Sophia, a silent affirmation, before retreating to give them space. The club moved like a well-oiled machine, each member filling roles born of necessity. Tyler outside, checking the perimeter with binoculars, his watchful gaze sweeping the ridge where shadows might hide. As the sun crested the mountains, gilding the scrub in amber hues, the ranch came alive with purpose. Lena joined them, her tattooed arms folding as she assessed Sophia with a healer's eye. "You need rest, but first, we talk strategy. Those men in the SUV, they're tied to Victor, and he's got friends in high places. The sheriff's been turning a blind eye for years, pocketing favors like loose change." Her words painted a picture of corruption woven into the town's fabric. Loans enforced by intimidation, vulnerable families squeezed until they broke. Sophia's story wasn't unique. Whispers from the diner spoke of others, widows evicted, kids pulled from homes for debts unpaid. The vipers had heard it all on their rides, but this hit close, igniting a moral fire that demanded action. By mid-morning, the group gathered in the living room, the space transformed into a war room of sorts. Maps spread across the coffee table, marked with routes and safe houses, while the scent of gun oil lingered from a quick maintenance check, defensive, never aggressive. Ethan traced a line on the paper, his finger halting at the Reed family spread, a crumbling homestead 10 miles north. "We go to him direct. No ambushes, no guns drawn, just truth. He needs to hear what his choices cost." Sophia's face paled, but she straightened, Hope asleep in a bassinet nearby. "He won't listen. He's changed, hardened by the losses. But, for her, I'll face him." The ride out was tense, a tight formation of 8 bikes cutting through the heat-shimmering roads, dust trailing like a comet's tail. The desert whispered warnings, wind rustling mesquite branches, the sun baking the earth into cracked mosaics. Victor's ranch appeared on the horizon, a faded relic with sagging fences and a windmill creaking lazily. They pulled up in a loose semicircle, engines idling to a respectful purr before silencing. Victor emerged from the porch, a wiry man in his 50s, face weathered like old leather, shotgun loose in his grip but not raised. His eyes, sharp and suspicious, locked on Sophia first, then Ethan. "What the hell is this? Some biker circus come to collect?" Sophia dismounted Lena's bike, legs unsteady but voice firm. "Dad, it's over. The baby's safe, with people who care. You don't get to threaten her anymore." The words cracked the air, raw and unfiltered, drawing Victor's bluff. He lowered the gun slightly, but defiance etched his features. "You think you can just walk away? Those debts, they'll bury us all. I did what I had to for the family." Ethan stepped forward, his presence commanding without aggression. The club's unity, a backdrop of quiet strength. "Family ain't built on fear, Victor. It's promises kept even when it hurts. We've seen your kind of protection. It leaves scars deeper than any debt." The confrontation unfolded like a slow-burning fuse, voices rising then falling, accusations peeling back layers of regret. Victor's bluster crumbled under Sophia's gaze, tears carving tracks through the dust on his cheeks as he glimpsed the truth of his isolation. No dramatic showdown, just the poetics of honesty. Ethan sharing his own tale of loss, the son he'd failed to save from the streets, mirroring Victor's fall. Marcus added his voice, a veteran's wisdom on battles won through loyalty, not force. By the time the sun hung high, Victor slumped onto the porch steps, the shotgun forgotten. "I thought I was saving us," he muttered, the admission a bridge to redemption. As they rode back, the weight lifted slightly, but shadows lingered. Word of the meeting spread through the town like wildfire. Folks at the general store murmuring, the diner buzzing with reluctant admiration. The vipers had pierced the veil of silence, exposing the corruption that festered unchecked. Sophia held hope closer upon their return, a spark of hope in her eyes, while Ethan watched the horizon, knowing the real test loomed, convincing the sheriff to stand down, unraveling the web that bound so many. The town, once indifferent, began to stir, tears welling not from pity, but from the raw awakening of communal honor, a cry for the justice long denied. If this chapter stirred something in you, hit that like button. It helps these stories reach more hearts in need of hope. The midday sun scorched the ranch's tin roof, sending waves of heat rippling across the yard like a desert mirage. Ethan Harlan stood by the fence line, his leather vest slung over one shoulder, wiping grease from his hands on a rag, stained with engine oil. The scent of mesquite smoke drifted from the grill, where Marcus tended a simple lunch of burgers and beans, the sizzle a comforting counterpoint to the undercurrent of unease that had settled over the group since the ride to Victor's. Hope's laughter bubbled from inside, a high-pitched trill as Sophia bounced her on her knee, the sound weaving through the open windows like threads of fragile normalcy. But Ethan's gaze kept drifting to the road, where dust devils danced in the distance, harbingers of approaching trouble. Word from town had trickled in like sand through fingers. Victor Reed, once a pillar of quiet disdain, had been seen at the general store that morning, his shoulders hunched, eyes hollow, as he paid off a small tab with trembling hands. Whispers followed him, tales of debts forgiven in part, promises extracted not by force, but by the weight of his daughter's gaze. The Viper's intervention had cracked something in the old man, a fissure that let light into his shadowed world. Yet redemption was a double-edged blade, and Ethan's instincts, honed by years of riding through storms both literal and figurative, told him the lenders wouldn't fade quietly. They were the kind who thrived on fear, their grip tightened by complicit badges like Sheriff Harlan's. As the afternoon wore on, the crunch of tires on gravel announced the inevitable. The sheriff's cruiser rolled up slow, deliberate, its engine a low growl that matched the man's perpetual scowl. He stepped out, uniform crisp despite the heat, aviators reflecting the glare as he adjusted his belt. Behind him, 2 deputies lingered in the car, hands resting near holsters, not drawn, but a reminder of the power imbalance they wielded. Ethan met him halfway, Marcus emerging from the house with a spatula in hand, his presence a subtle reinforcement. Inside, Sophia tensed, pulling Hope closer, while Lena moved to the window, her sharp eyes assessing the threat. "Ethan," the sheriff drawled, removing his hat to fan himself, revealing sweat-slicked hair. "Heard you paid a visit to the Reeds. Stirring up old dust, are we?" "Do." His tone carried the false camaraderie of a man who knew the town's underbelly all too well, debts collected in back rooms, favors traded for silence. Ethan stood firm, the sun baking his back, but his voice remained even, laced with the quiet authority of someone who'd faced worse than words. "Just family matters, Sheriff. Victor's seeing sense. No need for your involvement." The sheriff's laugh was dry like rustling thorns. "Family? That's rich, coming from a pack of road dogs. That girl's kid. Social services called it in. Papers are coming. And Victor's creditors? They're none too happy about loose ends." He glanced toward the house, his gaze lingering on the window where Sophia's silhouette hovered. The implication was clear. This was no idle chat. The lenders had reached out, pulling strings to reclaim what they saw as collateral. Sophia's silence, the child's safety, bartered away. Ethan's jaw clenched, memories surging of his own battles with the system, the red tape that had entangled his son in a web of despair before it was too late. You turning a blind eye to those sharks? For what? A cut of the action? This town's better than that. Tension coiled in the air, thick as the heat, the deputies shifting in their seats like coiled springs. Marcus stepped closer, his prosthetic leg a steady anchor, but Ethan raised a hand. Peace first, always. The sheriff's face hardened, but beneath the bluster doubt flickered, a crack in his armored indifference. He'd patrolled these roads for decades, watching families fracture under the weight of greed, his own choices a mirror to Victor's fall. "You think you're heroes? One wrong word and I shut this down. The girl's a flight risk, the kid's a ward of the state." Yet his feet didn't move forward, the words lacking their usual bite, as if the viper's stand had planted seeds of conscience in barren soil. From the porch, Sophia emerged. Hope balanced on her hip, her chin lifted in defiance born of desperation's forge. "Sheriff, you know my father. You know what those men do, pressuring folks until they break. I left her to protect her, not abandon her. These people, they saved us." Her voice, steady despite the tremor, cut through the standoff like sunlight piercing clouds. The sheriff's eyes softened fractionally, meeting hers, a moment of raw humanity amid the badges and threats. Lena joined her, arm around Sophia's shoulders, the club's women a pillar of unyielding support. Tyler and the others filtered out, forming a loose circle, not aggressive but united, their leather vests bearing the viper patch like a banner of chosen kin. The sheriff paused, hat back on, shielding his eyes from the unrelenting sun. Whispers from town had reached him too. Folks at the diner nodding approval, the general store owner slipping him a note about Victor's quiet confession. The web of corruption, once invisible, now glimmered in the light of exposure. "This ain't over," he muttered, but the fight had drained from his stance. He climbed back into the cruiser, the engine coughing to life, tires spinning a lazy arc of dust as he departed. No arrests, no raids, just a retreat, the first fracture in the town's facade of apathy. As the dust settled, the group exhaled collectively, the ranchers quiet, reclaiming the moment. Ethan pulled Sophia aside, his hand gentle on her arm. "You faced him down. That's more than most." She nodded, tears glistening but unshed, hope reaching out to grasp his finger with surprising strength. Inside, Victor arrived unannounced, his truck rumbling up the drive like a prodigal's return. He stepped out, hat in hands, eyes meeting Ethan's with a mix of shame and resolve. "I called off the dogs," he said gruffly, voice cracking. "Told the lenders it's done, sold what land I had to square it. For her." The admission hung between them, a promise redeemed, binding old wounds with threads of forgiveness. Word spread through the afternoon like a gentle breeze, carrying tales of the standoff to every corner of the town. At the diner, patrons raised mugs in silent toasts. In the barbershop, old-timers shared nods of respect. The Vipers had done more than protect one child. They'd ignited a reckoning, peeling back the layers of indifference to reveal the honor beneath. Ethan watched Victor hold hope for the first time, grandfather's hands trembling as they cradled new life, Sophia's smile a beacon in the fading light. The sun dipped low, painting the horizon in strokes of crimson and gold, a canvas of hope against the gathering dusk. Yet shadows lingered on the edges, hints of deeper debts unpaid, alliances fraying under scrutiny. Ethan knew the final ride loomed, one that would demand the club's full measure of loyalty to seal this fragile peace. As stars began to prick the twilight sky, the ranch stood as a fortress of chosen family, its walls echoing with the quiet strength of vows kept. The town, stirred from slumber, felt the stirrings of tears, not from loss, but from the profound ache of witnessing redemption unfold, one honorable heart at a time. The evening sky over the ranch deepened to a bruised indigo, stars emerging like hesitant witnesses to the day's unraveling truths. Ethan Harlan sat on the porch steps, the wood still warm from the sun's retreat, a cold beer sweating in his grip. The scent of grilled mesquite lingered, mingling with the earthy tang of cooling soil, while crickets began their nocturnal chorus, a symphony that masked the undercurrents of unfinished business. Inside, laughter filtered through the screen door. Sophia's soft voice reading a makeshift bedtime story to Hope, Victor's gruff chuckle joining in for the first time, a bridge mending cracks he'd helped carve. The old rancher had stayed, his truck parked crookedly in the drive, a symbol of surrender to the pull of family reclaimed. But peace was a fragile rider on these roads, and Ethan's instincts prickled like gravel under tires. The lenders, faceless men, operating from smoke-filled backrooms in the county seat, wouldn't dissolve with Victor's confession. They'd woven their threats through the town's veins, buying silence with bribes and intimidation, their empire built on the broken backs of folks like the Reeds. Sheriff Harlan's retreat that afternoon had been a feint, not a fold. Ethan's contact had buzzed his phone an hour ago with a warning, a meeting at the old mill on the outskirts, where debts were tallied and fates sealed. "They're calling in markers," the voice had rasped. "Your name's on the list now, Ethan, for meddling." He rose, muscles aching from the day's tensions, and signaled Marcus with a nod. The second in command appeared from the shadows of the barn, wiping his hands on his jeans, his prosthetic leg catching the faint glow of the porch light. "Time?" Marcus asked, reading Ethan's face like an open map. "Yeah, full crew, no guns, just presence. We end this with words, not lead." The Vipers assembled quietly, a ritual honed by years of standing against the tide, Lena kissing Hope's forehead before slipping on her helmet, Tyler checking chains with steady hands, the others emerging from the house like ghosts summoned to duty. Sophia watched from the doorway, Victor beside her, his weathered face set in quiet resolve. "Be careful," she whispered, clutching Hope close. Ethan met her eyes, the weight of their shared journey a silent vow. "We ride for the forgotten. Always." The convoy thundered out under the moon's pale gaze, 20 bikes slicing through the night, headlights carving golden paths across the blacktop. The desert air rushed cool against their faces, carrying whispers of sage and distant thunder, the engine's roar a defiant anthem that echoed off canyon walls. The old mill loomed on the horizon, a skeletal relic of the town's faded industry, its silos jagged against the stars like broken promises. They pulled up in a wide arc, engines cutting to a hush that amplified the night's tension, the creak of rusted metal, the faint murmur of voices from within. 3 cars waited, the sheriff's cruiser, a sleek sedan that screamed hired muscle, and a battered pickup that screamed local complicity. Sheriff Harlan stepped out first, his silhouette bulky in the headlights, flanked by 2 men in cheap suits. The lender's enforcers, faces hard as flint, Victor's debts had been their leverage, but the Viper's interference threatened the fragile balance of fear they'd cultivated. "This ends here, Ethan," the sheriff barked, his voice carrying across the gravel lot. "You've poked the bear! These gentlemen want the girl and the kid handed over. No questions, no fuss. Social services is en route." The lead lender, a slick-haired type with a gold pinky ring, smirked from the shadows, his eyes gleaming with the arrogance of untouchable power. Ethan dismounted, his boots crunching deliberately, the club fanning out behind him, a wall of leather and loyalty, unyielding yet restrained. The air thickened with the scent of motor oil and tension, the mill's wind whispering through gaps like a held breath. "Hand her over? To what? Your machine of indifference. We've seen what that does. Kids lost, mothers broken, towns rotting from the inside." His words landed like stones in still water, rippling through the standoff. Marcus stepped forward, his voice a low thunder. "Victor's paid his due, sold his land, faced his shame. You squeeze more, and it's not debt, it's extortion, and we're done watching." The sheriff shifted, discomfort etching his features, the weight of the town's awakening pressing on him. Whispers had swelled into a murmur, the diner owner refusing a bribe, the general store posting a quiet notice of support for the Reeds, even the church ladies organizing a fund for Victor's losses. The Vipers hadn't just protected one family, their stand had lit a fuse, exposing the corruption that bound the community in chains of silence. Lena spoke next, her tone sharp as a blade. "You badges swear to protect, but you've let these sharks feed on the vulnerable. Time to choose sides." The lenders bristled, one hand twitching toward a jacket pocket, but Tyler's quiet presence nearby, a man who'd lost everything to similar greed, held them in check, his eyes promising consequences beyond fists. In the charged silence, Victor's truck rumbled into the lot, uninvited but inevitable. He climbed out, Sophia at his side. No, wait. She'd stayed with hope, but her father carried her words like armor. "It's over," Victor said, voice cracking but firm, stepping into the circle of lights. "I recorded it all, every threat, every deal. Handed copies to the county prosecutor this afternoon. Your game's up." The sheriff's face drained of color, the lenders exchanging panicked glances as the truth sank in. One man's redemption had unraveled their web, backed by the unshakable loyalty of outcasts turned guardians. No shots fired, no blows landed, just the poetics of accountability, words sharper than any weapon. The sheriff holstered his radio with a defeated sigh, turning to his cruiser. "This town's changing," he muttered, the admission a concession to the moral tide. The lenders slunk away, their sedan peeling out into the night, tails between legs. As the Vipers mounted up, the mill stood silent, its shadows retreating like vanquished ghosts. Back at the ranch, dawn's first blush painted the sky in soft pinks and golds, the convoy returning to a scene of quiet triumph. Hope stirred in her cradle, her cries met by Sophia's soothing hum, while Victor poured coffee with hands that no longer shook. The town awoke to the news, spread by early risers and phone calls, tears flowing in kitchens and shops, not from sorrow, but from the cathartic release of long-buried hopes. Families who'd suffered in silence found voices. The sheriff's office issued a terse statement on reform. Ethan watched from the porch, the locket around his neck warm against his skin, his old promise to his wife fulfilled in this new legacy. The Iron Vipers had ridden into the storm and emerged whole, their chosen family expanded by bonds of blood and honor. In the distance, the desert stretched endless, but for the first time, it felt like home, a canvas for quiet victories, where promises endured and justice whispered through the wind. The whole town cried, hearts mended by the raw beauty of redemption, proving that even in the harshest sands, loyalty could bloom eternal. Thank you for riding with us to the end of this story. If it moved you, please subscribe for more tales of courage and chosen family. We'd be honored to have you along for the next journey.